Hi, and welcome to this week's Tuesdays with Grace. My name is Megan Shirley, and I'm going to show you a project that I've been really excited and I've been working on for a long time. So this quilt, as you can see right here, is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. I saw my mom make one when I was a little kid, and I've always wanted to make one. And so I decided to learn how to do the orange peel quilt. And it turned out to be a lot more than I expected it to be, but it was still a lot of fun to make. So in order to do this, one of the main things is you need to decide how big your squares are for your finished product. So for me, I decided to make 3-inch squares. So it's rather small, so you're gonna need your square and a template for your orange peel. So I cut this one out of cardboard. I just drew a 3-inch square, and I went from corner to corner so you could see the template. And so another thing you're gonna need is freezer paper. So freezer paper is really helpful in a lot of ways. So what you're gonna do is take this and trace it on your freezer paper until you get these. So they're shiny on one side and they're matte on the other, and so these are going to become your templates for your orange peel. And so for each of these little middle parts here, so there are a couple parts to this block. So there's the actual peel itself, which is right here, and then you have the background block, which you can see right here. And so it is a turned under applique that you then take off the back so you can take out the paper to piece it together. And so I'll take you through the process of making this block, or at least how I made this. So for your orange peel itself, you can use a lot of scrap pieces, or you can cut them out of the same fabric. And you're going to take one of your templates, and you're going to iron it on the wrong side of the fabric. You're gonna wanna hold down to make sure it sticks. When I was making mine, I had a lot of orange peel papers that came up, and it was really difficult to use. So make sure that your paper sticks to your fabric. So now you have a lot of stacks of these. So you have the freezer paper on your fabric, and so then you take your scissors, or you can use a rotary cutter. I used both. So you can take your scissors, or a rotary cutter goes a lot faster, especially if you're doing as many as I did. So when you're doing the orange peel, the first thing you're really gonna wanna do is decide how big your squares are and how big your quilt is going to be. And that changes things. So for mine, I did 3-inch squares, and it ended up being somewhere in the 600s. So I made about 600 of these blocks. And so then I took this, and you give yourself about 1/4 inch. It doesn't really matter all that much because it'll be turned under. So you go around and you trim your orange peels till they look something like that. This one's a little fat, so I'm going to trim it down. So then the next step you're going to want to do is you need to clip them, because curves, as we find in garment sewing, don't really like to go, fabric doesn't like to curve around things. So if you clip it, then it'll curve a lot nicer and it'll lay a lot flatter for you. So then you take it and you snip all the way around. And if you're making as many blocks as I did, you may want to watch a movie or TV. I did this a lot as busy work for my hands when I was in meetings and things like that. It's just something you can do while you're doing something else, because this does take quite a bit of time. So then you clip all the way around like this, and then you take it back to the ironing board. So then you're going to want to iron back all of these little clipped pieces that we did. And you can use a seam ripper or something if it's too hot for your hand. I did a lot of these and they ended up being really hot. And so then you iron it back so they lay a little bit flatter. So then you get peels like this. And so you can make a whole bunch of these and have stacks, and then you can have your blocks that you've decided. So then the fun part happens where you get to choose which blocks go on what. And so for me, I'm going to use a pin this time, but when I was doing the actual process, I used a glue stick because it took a while to do these. And so then you pin them in the center just like that. Let's see, let's choose this one. And so that they lay flat in the center of your block. Like that. So now they're ready to be taken to the machine. So I'm using the little Rebel here. And something that's going to be really helpful while you're doing this is a seam ripper. So I used a seam ripper quite a bit when I was sewing this, because if you've noticed a little bit on my blocks here, they don't lay really that flat, and we want to get them to tuck under. So what I would do, and what I did with mine, is I tucked them underneath, and this one isn't completely straight, so I'm going to straighten it out. Then you tuck the little clipped areas underneath. So then you can take it to the machine. So for me, I did a zigzag, but on this machine is a straight stitch, so you want to follow the edge of your peel as close as you can get it. And you can use a contrasting thread or a similar color thread, and I'm going to use a contrasting thread on mine so you can see it a little bit better. It's going to take some practice getting all of this tucked under. I did this quite a bit, so it's a lot faster for me now than when I started. And if they don't all line up perfectly or look perfect, it's okay. I picked this project for the fall because to me it looks like falling leaves, and so if your leaves aren't perfect, that's okay. No one will be looking that closely to see the discrepancies. And mine is cut, so I'm just gonna cut this thread here. Okay. When you get to a corner, you're gonna wanna lift up your foot pedal so you can pivot around and so you can have a nice crisp edge. So now you have it in this stage. It's all sewed on, but then you still have the piece of paper involved in the middle. And so once you clip your threads here, let's see, I'm gonna clip my threads so it looks nice. You're gonna take your fabric scissors and then you're gonna cut the back. So this is the part where you have to be careful. I have cut through both layers of the orange peel, and you don't want to have a block with a hole in the middle. So you're going to want to be very careful and make sure you just get the back of the fabric and clip a little bit so that gives you an opening to cut the rest out. So then you're gonna pull the paper, just kind of tug on it until it comes loose. Then you're going to take it out of the back of your orange peel. And now you have a finished block. And so for me, this took quite a bit of time. And so then you get the fun part of matching blocks together. So then you use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then you sew the blocks together. And so a block for me, let's see, you don't want to have corresponding fabrics go near each other. Like I've just picked 3 of the corresponding fabric. So then you would piece this together. And so to make it easier on myself to count blocks to the size that I wanted, I made a block 4 of these little squares. And so that way it was bigger, so I didn't have to count so many little squares for my block. So I had to do 16 per block. And so that way I could easily count them and figure out how many I needed. And so that's what I did on my orange peel, is I put them together, making sure like fabrics were not near each other, because I wanted them to have variety and I didn't want them to be together. In my quilt, it ended up that they were together in some places, but looking at the whole quilt overall, it's not as easy to tell. And so some of your blocks end up like fabrics next to each other, it's okay. No one is going to be scrutinizing your quilt that close. So this is what your quilt's gonna look like once you get all of your blocks together. So as you can tell, you can't really notice, I ran out of threads in some places, so I have some different thread colors around my orange peels, but it's not really that noticeable. And so then you get to quilting. And so I decided to do some free motion on the back of my quilt. So I decided to do leaves because I wanted it to be fall themed. So I did a meander of leaves. And I also did it on a minky background, so it's really soft and fluffy. So for a meander or a quilting free motion, make sure you know what your design looks like before you do it. And also practice. If you don't feel comfortable practicing on your nice quilt that you spend a lot of time for, especially on the orange peel, this is a quilt that'll take you a long time to do. I did mine in about 3 months, but that's because this is what I do for work, and so I have the time to do this. And so practice what you want to be on your back. So I did different leaves, so I did some test ones, and then I decided that I liked this, and so then I kept going. So one tip that I have for you on free motion is to listen to music. So music is very helpful for me when I'm free motion quilting. It helps me keep the beat and also helps me move the machine fluidly instead of jerking it around. And now I want to show you. So I did my minky, and so then I decided to do a rollover binding. And so then I went and trimmed all of my batting off and trimmed out my backing to 1 inch away from my quilt. And be very careful when you're trimming this so you don't nick the minky and have a hole in it. I did that somewhere and I will have to go back and hand sew it closed. So be very careful when you're trimming your minky. And so what you're gonna do for the backing is to fold the corner once and then fold it again. And then you'll fold the side. And so then you get to sew, you'll fold it this once and then fold it again. So you have this really nice point. So what you're gonna do is sew down this point and sew along the side. So as my coworkers just taught me as I was struggling with my quilt, she taught me to roll it up, and so it's easier, so it balances on your legs, so you're not fighting with the rest of the bulk on your quilt. So that way you can just sew easier on the binding. then you would do this process all the way around your quilt until you're done. Unless you were doing another binding where you would put it on, you would sew it on the back and then fold it over in kind of the same way. But that is not for I'm not doing that on my quilt this time because this is a Minky. And there are tutorials out there if you need help with that kind of quilt. So thank you so much for joining me today on this project that I've been wanting to do since I was little. It was a lot of fun to make. It will take a lot of time, so if you're going to do this, it's an investment, and know that it will take a while. It is tedious at times, but it is really worth it because I love the outlook of how it came out. And I'm so excited that I got to share it with you today on Tuesdays with Grace.